This is Reverend Dore Patlian talking to you from Sarasota, Florida. As you watch the video, look at the pretty and beautiful pictures of Sarasota, Florida, one of the nicest cities in America to live and one of the prettiest in the state of Florida. Why do I use those for the video, some people have asked me. Sarasota is a lot prettier than my face. All right, let's talk about the Christ phenomenon today. Why does the world call the man named Yeshua Ben Nazareth Jesus Christ? It clearly was not his name. Have you ever, in modern or ancient times, heard of a Jew named Jesus? Neither have I. If he lived today, the American Express card he carried would not say Jesus H. Christ. What's in a name, you may ask? In the name of Jesus, everything. Let's clear up his given name first. His name was Joshua in English, or Yeshua in Aramaic, which was the language he spoke and just about everybody in what we call the Holy Land spoke at that time. Remember, people in his culture did not have last names as we know them today. They were identified either by the first name of their father or the place of their birth. Since the legitimacy of Jesus' birth to Joseph and Mary was in some dispute, he was usually called Yeshua of Nazareth, or Yeshua Ben Nazareth. Most scholars today do not place any credence in Luke's manger and Bethlehem story. Most reputable historians of the Roman era believe he was born in Nazareth, not Bethlehem, and they do this because there's no record whatsoever of the so-called worldwide census ordered by Caesar Augustus. We're pretty sure that Caesar Augustus, being very orderly and very dedicated to order in the empire, would have never sent millions of people all on the roads at the same time to enroll at the city of their birth. That would have been a nightmare. There's also no record of such an event, which is unusual in a civilization that even recorded the number of olive oil jars on a ship or how many people lived in a certain apartment. We're pretty sure that event never took place. We know the man Joshua as Jesus because the English garbling of his Latin name, which was Yehu. From Yehu, we get Jesus. So now we've cleared that up. Over the centuries, we've piled error upon error in regards to the life and works of this great teacher of God's truth. His story has now become so encrusted with legends and half-truths that it's hard to separate historical fact from legend. It now becomes a simple matter of faith, what each of us believes because no one alive today knows. And you can't really go by the four Gospels because none of those writers ever saw Jesus in life. They all lived after his death. They all wrote as much as 70 years after his death. They weren't first-person witnesses, so they only wrote what they had heard, handed down over and over. Where did the word Christ come from, and what does it mean? It is well to remember that the Christ is a title, it's not a name. Christi, or Christ, is the Latin rendering of the Greek word Christos, and that means the anointed one or the one chosen by God. Christos means much the same thing as the Hebrew word Messiah, but it doesn't have the implication of literal kingship. The Messiah is supposed to be the king of Israel. This is not what a Christ is. He is a spiritual leader, never a temporal one. In the ancient Greek-speaking world, which was all of the eastern half of the Roman Empire, a Christos or Christ was regarded as the highest level of sage or teacher of truth. A Christ devoted his life to understanding, experiencing, and teaching the ways of God at the highest level. In Asia, a person touched by God and called to reveal truth is called a Buddha. In Persia, Zarathustra. In India, the title is Mahatma. We all know of Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma is not his name, it's his title. The person we call Jesus was born a Jew to two very human parents, regardless of the lovely but rather pagan story of divine impregnation. He never once claimed divine birth, but he did say that he and every one of us are sons and daughters of God. He always called himself the Son of Man, and that's important to note. It means the servant of mankind, the Son of Man. He never said he was the literal Son of God. Not once. He knew that he was born for a special calling, that he had been touched by God and tasked to bring the light of God's truth to a world sorely beset by strife, hatred, and revenge. His life mission was to teach love, tolerance, and forbearance to a world that knew only an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. He was as human as any of us that ever walked this earth, and that is the power, majesty, and the glory of his work in life. Imagine, if you will, a humble Jewish boy called by God to transcend his humble birth in a poor backwater of the Roman Empire, so wretched and so poor that even the Romans regretted conquering it. He was poor, sparsely educated, could speak neither Greek nor Latin, and yet possessing the Christ mind, and with the hand of God on his shoulder every step of the way, he changed the world forever. He introduced us to divine love and divine law in a world hungry for light, and the world hasn't been the same since. Even though he was a man's man, he was still able to bring the feminine energy of love and forgiveness to a might makes right world. Now, if you're one who believes that he was the literal begotten Son of God, I won't debate that with you, because none of us knows the facts of the matter. It's all a matter of belief. But consider this: does it not follow that a literal Son of God, half God and half man, could transform the world as easily as we turn a page in a book and perform any miracle, from raising the dead to healing the sick to walking on water, without any effort at all? It would be child's play for such a being. Would death be a great sacrifice to a God who is physically immortal? Would a few hours on a cross be a terrible punishment for a God who could transport his spirit to another dimension at will? Would resurrection be a miracle for a God? I don't think so. Even as a child, I never bought into this legend because it didn't make any sense. The idea of the virgin birth makes all he did trivial. He is so much greater when seen as a human, just as you and I. Listen to this. Would it not truly be a miracle if a young Jewish man, born just like hundreds of thousands of other young men, could raise the dead, feed 5,000 with nothing but a loaf and 5 fish, walk on water, cure leprosy, insanity, epilepsy, turn water into wine, and then rise from the dead? Now, you know, we're not sure he did all of these things. There's no historical record. But he must have done some things pretty dramatic to capture the attention of the world. It couldn't have been just a simple Jewish boy working in a carpenter shop, that's for sure. He said he came to teach us that what he could do, we could all do. Do you not know that you are all God's? Greater things than I have done will you do also, if you believe. That's the words of the Master. How many of us believe them? Almost none of us. How is this possible if he's literally a God? Remember, the key word in what he told us was believe. You know, a God doesn't have to believe anything. He just is. No, if he is just like you and I, then what he can do, we can all do, if we have the mind of Christ within us, as did the Master. What is the Christ mind? What in the world am I talking about? It is the highest state of consciousness that a human being can attain. One is not born Christed, but we are all born with the potential of achieving it. It's something one works a lifetime to achieve. Jesus had it done by the time he was 30 years old. He was a quick study. To achieve this exalted state of being takes a total dedication of one's life, mind, spirit, and body, and the willingness to let go of the everyday world. You cannot be a Christ and worry about the wife and kids. You can't be a Christ and worry about making a living or paying the rent. You can't be a Christ and be a part of the day-to-day world. To be a Christ, one must master the art of being in the world, but not of it. One must surrender his life to the higher good of bringing light to the world. Because if you do that, everything else will be added to you. You'll attract to you all the supply you need of goods, services, money, whatever you may need. Jesus never wanted for anything. People were lined up to assist him in any way he needed. Because he was the Christ. Not because he was Jesus, because he was the Christ. To be a Christ, one must surrender his life to that higher good of bringing light to the world. You will have no business but God's business if you do that. And you know, in truth, everything is God's business because God is everything there is, isn't it? How many times did Jesus say this even to his mother? I'm on the Father's business. I'm doing the Father's work. He could be quite abrupt, even with family who wanted him to stop this messing around and come back and live a normal life and help Joseph in the shop. He was born to this Christ life, and nothing could interfere. Not family, not the girl he loved so much. I'll tell you about that in a coming video. Be sure to be around for that. Not the allure of a comfortable life of a sage with students, family, and children gathered around him. Nothing must take precedence over his divine appointment from God. The wonder of Jesus is that he was us, but so much more. He transcended the petty, the mundane, the daily struggle for sustenance, happiness, and pleasure. He was not born a literal Son of God, but he became a Christed Son of God, which is so much more. As we may all do if we would do the work. No, he was born for the Father's business and nothing else would do. Few human beings can transcend their humanity so completely as did the man we call Jesus. It is said that there have been 6 Christs sent to humanity thus far in human history, but for much of the world, Jesus is the Christ because he was an example of what every one of us could be if we would but transform our minds, our hearts, and our lives. Be you transformed by the renewal of your mind. Paul said that in Romans 12:2, and it may have been the wisest thing Paul ever said. And it is the basic philosophy or basic thinking behind the science of mind. Be you transformed by the renewal of your mind. Each one of us is transformed when we renew our mind or change the way we think completely. Do you not know that we're all on an eternal journey to Christhood? Think about that as you drift off to sleep tonight. The indwelling God is consciously present in your life each waking and sleeping moment. And I know that your life will be a heaven on earth. God bless and keep you until we are together again. This is Reverend Dore Patlian saying goodbye for now.